Hey guys, hope your weekend's going okay. And looking forward to getting back to you on Monday when we do our ethics activities. But first, let's talk about some of our ethics notes. And hopefully, you've had a chance to look at the videos on the Tuskegee syphilis experiment um, and then the Rosenhan study. And we will talk about those a little bit more on Monday as well. But let's get into some ethics. Down here, you have five essential questions that you may want to be able to answer by the time when we finish with these. So you can want to write those down and review those. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so there's a history of unethical science that takes place, and it starts in World War II with the Nazi Germany, in Nazi Germany, sorry. During the Holocaust, they did human experiments in the areas of medical and psychological experiments on a wide range of people, men, women, children, and obviously didn't take many safeguards and didn't really care about their well-being. And then you have radiation experiments from the 1944 through 1979, where they're exposing people to radiation to test the effects. And then obviously the Tuskegee experiment, which was conducted in 1972, which you watched a short video on to see what that was all about, and obviously the unethical practices of that, exposing black males to syphilis and testing, looking at the effects of untreated syphilis on humans. So who says that research is ethical? And so when we look at who says that it's ethical, we look at the American Psychological Association. They have a code of ethics that was created in 1953. And so we follow this code in terms of what is deemed to be an ethical research practices. And so each university or person who is going to do research must submit a written document describing their research, what they're going to do to a board that's called the Institutional Review Board. And that panel will look over and scrutinize what's going to be done, and then they approve or deny the research based on the code of ethics that is supplied by the American Psychological Association. And this is per institution. So each college or institution that's going to be conducting this type of research has their own institutional review board. So, like I've told you about my thesis that I did, I had to submit a one of these documents to the IRB so that I could be approved to study feedback effects on athletes because they were going to be receiving feedback, both good, bad, and none, to make sure that that was an ethical practice. And obviously, it was approved. So, but that is the process. So that's who says it's ethical. So, what then makes it ethical? There are a few different factors here. There are five different factors. The first is informed consent. And so you must inform all your potential participants about every aspect of the study that might influence their decision to participate and make it be voluntary. Um, so you have to tell them what's coming so that they can make a decision and decide whether they really do want to participate. It's different in terms of minors or children. You get assent from minors, and you have to continually ask them throughout the study, throughout the experimental process, how they're doing, and make sure that they are ready to proceed throughout, and make sure that that they're in good mental capabilities. So to protect them throughout. Then you also have to have limited. You're allowed to deceive your participants, but there needs to be limited deception. So you must only deceive people when it's absolutely essential to the study, and must tell about the deception at the end of the study during the debriefing stage, which we'll talk about later. So like we saw in Milgram's study, obviously there was deception there, and that deception was not, it was, you're allowed to deceive, Just in the Milgram study, you can't really deceive a person into thinking that they're actually hurting someone or possibly going to kill them, delivering a lethal shock. But you are allowed to deceive them as long as you disclose that deception during the debriefing stage. Also, protection from harm and discomfort for your participants. So you must minimize any discomfort or risk that's involved in the study, and you must act to prevent participants from suffering any long-term negative consequences, which is what made Milgram's study unethical. That portion. So there was could have been a long-term or short-term negative consequence in terms of their mental well-being, where they think they're actually hurting someone, even though we know now that they were not. They at the time believed that they were, and was causing them some mental distress and also maybe some physical stress. Also, participants must be free to not just participate, but also be free to withdraw from the experiment at any time. So they have to be able to leave the study if they're uncomfortable, or no longer want to participate for any reason. All right. Also, what makes it ethical is confidentiality. So you have to keep personal information about the participants secret. You can't disclose that. It's like any doctor or anyone handling medical information about a person. It's against the law to disclose someone's medical information. And so you cannot disclose that a person participated in your psychological experiment or hand out their personal information. So you cannot disclose that. The report results in such a way that personal information is not disclosed. So you give them an identifying number or some sort of thing that does not disclose any personal information about them so that people can identify them. Then also, like we talked about, the debriefing stage, you have to reveal all relevant information about the research and correcting any misimpressions it created. So you have to go through any deceptions and anything that they need. You kind of talk through with the participants and correct anything that they may have gone through and kind of help them through that, so that they leave the same way that they came in. So all participants must leave the study the same way that they arrived. So if someone comes in generally happy, if they come in not intoxicated or consuming a drug, then they have to leave with that drug or that trial medication out of their system, or they have to leave happy. If you're studying a child and they are crying, then you have to keep them there and calm them and make sure that their mental well-being is the way it was when they came before you release them from the study. All right, then we move to animals, and animals is a touchy subject. I know many of you have probably seen in the news people protesting the use of animals in research. But why do we use them? It's because, one, their behavior is interesting and helpful. And so there's a lot of vaccines and things that we would not have today if it was not for the use of animals in research. And so because of research with animals can give us information that would be impossible or unethical to collect from humans, that's another reason why we use animals in research, because it's for the betterment of or the welfare of humans. And so animals, however, are not usually subjected to extreme pain, starvation, or other inhumane conditions. But if they are going to be harmed in research, then it must be deemed necessary to benefit the human welfare. So, for example, if we're studying cancer or tumors, how tumors develop in humans, then they may develop tumors in mice or rats and study how those tumors affect their immune systems and their other biological features. And so that way we could better understand how it's going to affect humans and maybe come up with a cure for it. There are guidelines, however, as to how to care for animals in research, just as there are for humans. Um, and so they have guidelines on how they're fed, how they're housed, how many of them, and when to clean their cages and everything else like that. So there are guidelines to treat them animals humanely, even though they are going into research. So who says it's ethical? Once again, the American Psychological Association Code of Ethics that was created in 1953 is also going to be the determining factor for ethics in animal research. However, animal research is going to be approved by an institutional animal care and use committee that's also in the same situation as the IRB. Each institution will have them, and so they will make the judgment. You submit your research for them to scrutinize, and then they get back to you on whether you have been approved or denied based on the ethics of your research using animals. So what does make it ethical when you're dealing with animals and animal research? Animals, the ABCs of laboratory research for animals. One is appropriate, nothing cruel and unusual involved in the research of animals. Also, that it must be beneficial. It has to be beneficial, must benefit human psychological research. And if it does benefit the research for human psychology, then it will be useful and ethical to use animals in that situation. And then caring. You must care for the animal's well-being and the way that they're treated. And there are regulation, like I said before, on the number of cages available, how to clean their cages, food, etc., and the treatment of those animals. So they are very well protected. Right. And then also the arguments against animal use in research. You have animal rights arguments. You have the utilitarian argument, which uses the principle of equality to oppose animal research, that all animals can suffer, therefore they should not be subjected to it. And so we kind of have to weigh the costs and benefits there, make an economic decision on whether human life and the preservation of the human way of life is worth the loss of some of these animals' lives, or even subjecting them to some of the things that they must suffer, and whether it's worth that to get cures for things like we've done in the past with the vaccine for polio or rabies. So we look at those things. Also, the inherent value, right? The value that comes with it. They ask who is entitled to hold rights, and so animals should not be treated as renewable resources. So like they're just going to replenish themselves. They're not really going to run out, or as long as they're not endangered, we can subject them to this. So those are the arguments against using animals in research. All right, so hope you got this. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will look at some activities on Monday with ethics. Have a great rest of your weekend.